Hi, everyone. I'm Raj Kumar, President and Editor-in-Chief of DevX, here on a really exciting day for the Hilton Foundation. This is the moment, as this video comes out, that you are going to all be learning about the prize, the 25th anniversary of the Hilton Prize, and who won it. And I can't think of a better guest to have to really get into the details of this than Peter Lawhorn, is, of course, the President and CEO of the Hilton Foundation, someone I've known for a long time. And I really want to dig into the prize, the backstory, and the foundation too. I mean, a lot of people have heard of the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation, but may not know that much about it. We're going to try to get into it today and really understand it better at a deeper level for our community here at DevX and really for everyone in the humanitarian and development sectors writ large. Peter, thanks for taking some time to do this.
Real happy to be here today with you, Raj.
It's a big day. Congratulations. I know the big announcement is now out as this video comes out. Why don't you tell us who won and why it's so exciting for the foundation?
This is always one of my favorite times of year when we get to announce the prize winner. And this year, I'm very happy to announce that the winner of the 2020 Hilton Humanitarian Prize is an LA-based organization, our hometown. It's Homeboy Industries that serves gang-involved and previously incarcerated individuals and helps them get jobs and be reintegrated into society.
And it's maybe surprising to some people who think of Hilton as this global humanitarian agency that you picked something Los Angeles based. Explain why that shouldn't be so surprising. What's the backstory?
Well, we're a foundation that works about half globally and half domestically. LA is our hometown and the place where we invest most of our domestic dollars. But the prize has typically gone to organizations working globally, either very experienced organizations that have been quite well known, Partners in Help, Médecins Sans Frontières, or upstart young organizations like Shining Hope for Communities in Nairobi, Matadresi, that works on refugees in Greece. But I think this year, the jury felt that Homeboy reflected not only work that is very much in line with the values of the Conrad Hilton Foundation, but also that was important to the issues of the day.
Yeah, it is a very timely organization. And as you say, the jury selects us. The foundation sets up kind of an independent jury process. And you mentioned, some of the names that may not be as well known of winners in the past. I've covered this myself. And, in my seat at DevX, I get to see and learn about so many organizations around the world. But one of the things I like about the prize is I often hear of organizations that were not on my radar screen. And then when I find out about them via the prize, I'm shocked. Like these are groups doing incredible work, and yet they haven't quite broken through. And that's kind of the point of the prize in a way, isn't it?
Well, indeed. We hope that one of the things the prize will do is shine a light on the work of an organization that may not be as well known, but has a very important story for the public to know, both for what it has accomplished itself and for what that work means for wider societies. And we think Homeboy is definitely one of those.
Yeah, tell us why. Why do you think Homeboy is so relevant in today's moment?
Let's start first from the values of the foundation and how we think that Homeboy reflects those. Homeboy, I think, and the foundation both find dignity and agency and worth in every individual. There is not an individual who doesn't have a path forward, no matter what their past may have been, no matter what the challenges they feel like they're facing, and frankly, no matter what challenges the system throws in front of them. And we feel that Homeboy really reflects that idea that there is dignity in everyone, and that in your work, you should look everyone in the eye and say, I see you, I recognize you, and let's work together on the future. So I think in that sense, Homeboy is very much in line with so many of the other laureates we've had in the prize. And in fact, it takes some of it a step further. Now, of course, there's also the context that you and I and everyone else who's listening to this today live in, where issues of racial equity, of fair treatment, of criminal justice are way in the front of people's minds. And, you can approach those from both a policy and an individual angle. And I think Homeboy is very, very strong at the individual level. Again, the looking in the eye, the care for everyone who comes in their doors, but they're also quite strong on what policy should be. and where we should head as a society. So again, it is an independent jury who makes this decision, but when we heard of the decision, we thought this is wonderful for this year and where we're at.
Yeah, when you think about the policy, it's things like alternatives to incarceration, right? It's saying law enforcement is obviously a big issue in the media today. People are thinking about what does the future look like, and I guess a big question that Homeboy tackles at a very local level is, all right, if we have a young person who has been gang involved, they've had a history, criminal history, how do we help them really change their own lives? And I know on their own website they have this incredible statistic of the number of tattoos removed. Yes. And they're really, it's as personal as it gets when you talk about individual. They see a person, not a gang member, right? And they say, hey, how do we work with you and help you change your own life?
Absolutely. And I think, very importantly, they see the rest of the life of this person. We tend to think about criminal justice reform as a policy about whether there ought to be prisons or not. And that's very important to work through for our society. But we know that there are millions of people who have been incarcerated, who get out of prison, and who need to make their way forward. And we as a society are responsible for that entry, but we're also responsible for the exit and the reentry. And I think Homeboy not only does great work themselves, but they open all of our minds and our hearts to what it is that we need to do to rebuild and to give a path forward.
So you started talking about the values of the foundation. This is the 25th anniversary of this prize. It's a significant prize. I think it's the biggest one in the humanitarian sector. Is it $2 million a year now, or is it even larger?
Actually, this year we're going to in recognition of the 25th anniversary of the prize, we're going to $2.5 million. It is unrestricted. The laureate can do with it what they will. And we've seen in the past many different ways that the funding was used. So it's the largest annual unrestricted grant to a humanitarian organization. And
I guess now that you're at 25 years, I know you haven't been at the foundation for all of that time, but how do you think about this prize? I mean, what are sort of the lessons that you've learned? What has been the trajectory over those 25 years that maybe as you look back at this history now that's been built, all these winners, you mentioned some of them. What do you think about it?
It's been a very rewarding experience for the foundation, for our community, to be able to look at all the organizations that are nominated. There is no way that we could do justice to all the amazing things that are done by nonprofits in our world, both from a policy angle and from a service angle. I think we've seen that all of these organizations, in one way or another, have done something that other people felt could not be done. When other people have kind of thrown up their hands, this problem is unsolvable, or it's not worth putting the effort into this, or another problem is sexier. These organizations have they've rolled up their sleeves and they said, no, we think this problem is solvable, and here's how we'll go about it. And I think Homeboy is a tremendous example of that, where most organizations are not putting their effort into what can happen for individuals who are coming out of incarceration. And I think they have found approaches, and they have demonstrated a level of compassion, as one of our other laureates says, consequential compassion, not just feeling for another, but saying, what does that mean that I should do, and how should things change because of that? And I think Homeboy is a tremendous example of that.
Yeah, one of my own feelings about this, having gotten to know some of the laureates over the years, is that they're not, the reason they're able to do what you just said, which is to stay focused on something, even if it's not the sexiest issue, even if it might seem intractable, is because they actually really care about that thing. They're driven at this passion, this level of kind of personal passion for the issue. It's not a technocratic approach where they're looking at a spreadsheet and they're analyzing the best policy response and then they're bringing it forward. These aren't management consultants, right? These are kind of activists, passionate people who are trying to make something better in the world. And because they feel it, they're willing to go up against all the odds. And probably many of them fail, but some of the very best, some of the ones who really make it, are what come through this prize process.
That's right. And we do want an emphasis on Homeboy this year, but some other examples really bear out what you said, Raj. If you look at the Task Force for Global Health, way back in the 1980s, they said, wait a second, we've got all children being vaccinated in the industrialized world, and we have 20% of kids being vaccinated in the developing world. And it's not because we don't have money. It's not because we don't know the value of it. It's not because we don't have political will, at least nominally. Really, it's because organizations are not being well choreographed. They're not being brought together in the way that they could pull this off affordably and in great numbers. And they went to the heads of UNICEF and WHO and said, this is just wrong. You know, I know you guys have turf, but you can work together on this. And they went on to help hundreds of millions of children get vaccinated. You know, and that spirit is in all of these organizations. And, you know, it's certainly in Homeboy, looking in the eyes of opposing gang members, looking in the eyes of the warden and the prisoner, looking in the eyes of the employer and of the formerly incarcerated person, and saying, you need to talk, you need to get together, and there is a way forward.
So what does this do? You're at this 25-year milestone. What does it mean, you think, for the future of both the prize and the foundation itself? I mean, a lot has happened. The foundation is now a lot larger, right? The family gifts to the foundation have dramatically increased the overall endowment. You've changed some things since you became the president and CEO several years ago now. In some ways, the prize was swimming against the stream for a while. This idea of really, you know, money that's undesignated and can be used for anything wasn't always the trend in foundation giving, where there was a lot of top-down kind of prescriptivist ideas about how NGOs should spend. What do you think is the future? Is the foundation likely to have a 50th anniversary of this prize? Or do you think there's going to be a major change in that? And then tie it to what your vision is for the foundation itself. Right.
A very excellent question. I mean, we see no need to retire the prize. There are challenges aplenty and solutions aplenty as well. And we feel there are many organizations out there that are finding solutions and cracking nuts that need to be cracked. Right. So I think the prize will continue, will thrive. And right now, what we're looking at in terms of the prize is we now have 25 laureate organizations, a council of wise elders, if there ever was one, you know, who can come together, give ideas, support, advise us on approaches to development. And we are, I think the development of that community is important to us, as is the annual prize. In terms of what the foundation is trying to do in the world, we're basically working in a number of areas where we would like to see our investment do a whole lot of good. I say to colleagues, typically, if a grant does $1 of good for $1 of grant, it's not doing its work. You know, we really need to be leveraging the money that we put out there, and helping greater good happen than we could help make happen by ourselves alone. That means a lot of partnerships with others, with governments, with the private sector, with other foundations, and certainly with civil society organizations. It means a strong support to the Sustainable Development Goals. I think the world is a little bit off kilter in the last few months because of COVID, but we will come out of this and need to take up the work again on both sustainable development and on climate. And I think we will also come out of it with ideas about how to do that better.
Yeah, and as your giving grows, you know, it's an interesting conundrum, and I've talked to lots of foundation presidents about this. Some bigger than your endowment, some smaller, and they say, in some ways, we're dealing with large amounts of money here, and a real responsibility to society when you look at the scale of the challenges. On the other hand, these are drops in the bucket compared to what's needed. And I wonder, how do you grapple with that? Again, looking ahead for where you're trying to take the foundation going forward. How are you grappling with having more resources, a good thing, but yet facing tremendous structural, systemic challenges in the world today?
Well, you know, I think it's a truism, and it's also an intention, that we will always tackle problems that are bigger than the resources that we have. If we had enough grant dollars to buy the answer to a problem, the problem wouldn't be big enough. Right? And so the question is, how can we stretch our resources, leverage them, bring in other resources, and bring in really good ideas about how problems can be tackled. A real good example, I think, is in our own backyard here in Los Angeles in terms of homelessness. Now, we've been working on homelessness for 20 years, right? And over the first 10 or so of those years, 12, the idea was understanding the idea of supportive housing and how that would really make a difference for people who are homeless. You don't need to get cleaned up. You don't need to get sobered up first. The first thing is you need housing, and then we'll work on the other things with wraparound services. Very similar, actually, to the Homeboy sort of approach. And we found that was an approach that worked. We found other funders that felt that, and we started building a coalition around it that was much bigger than us, and that took in many others. The Chamber of Commerce, virtually every foundation in Los Angeles, the electeds, the appointeds, to the point where 5 years ago, the city of Los Angeles put a $1.2 billion bond on the table, and the county, a quarter-cent sales tax that was $350 million a year. So basically, our $10 million is leveraging $500 million a year of governmental investment. That's much more than we could ever have brought to the table, and it showed, or it helped bring about a policy commitment that is highly aligned across the political spectrum. It doesn't mean that our problem is solved, as anyone who lives in Los Angeles can attest, right? There are still, there's a problem of great inflow that is growing and that will grow more because of COVID. We have 500,000 people who are a paycheck or two away from losing their home. So we need to take things that we know that they work, but find less expensive, more effective ways for them to get out, broaden that group, bring in the state, bring in the federal government, and bring in that funding stream that is larger. Now I think that playbook is what we would like to see in all of our work, that we play a catalytic and an organizing role, and that we help a much wider group of people understand how a problem can be tackled.
Yeah, and maybe homelessness is a good example for this reason, that it is getting worse, right? Mm-hmm. So it must be very challenging, and I want to get your take on how you think about this. You're a foundation like many others that are just chosen to tackle some of the toughest issues in the world. You're looking at things like homelessness in your backyard, but you're looking globally at things like humanitarian response, where there are more crises every year. They're getting worse. They're getting protracted. The statistics, every time you look, of people who are displaced internally in their country or living as refugees keep growing. We're looking at a world that it seems like the structural inequities are getting worse in some ways, not better. And COVID maybe makes things even worse in the short run. How do you think about that as a leader of what is now becoming one of the biggest foundations in the world, and trying to take it forward into the future? Does it change the way you think about your own programming or the way that the foundation works?
We're wrestling with this now, these very weeks and months, right? Because you're absolutely right about homelessness. The inflow is increasing. It was increasing before COVID, but COVID is going to really, really push it. And the question occurs to you, or you have to debate the question, are we trying to do too much? And we had this discussion recently. And I think where we landed is that our commitment is to ending homelessness. So if the situation is getting more difficult, we need to try to find higher performing solutions. It's not at all guaranteed that we will, right? This is politically complex. It is in terms of regulation, in terms of public attitudes about where housing should be built, is a very complex issue. And it's not to be excluded that after all this investment, we could fall flat on our faces. But I think the important thing is to really state the commitment to working on it and provide a pathway that people can understand. Not just we would like to end homelessness, wouldn't it be great? But here are no new methods that we should be using to tackle this. When you look at the number of people involved, 66,000 people is a daunting number. But we've worked on vaccination campaigns in Africa that are hundreds of millions, right? I think we need to put things in the right frame, in the right dimension, and take the problems apart systematically. We're a wealthy country, and this is something we should be able to tackle, just like most countries in the world are tackling it, if not perfectly, then significantly better than we see in our own.
And it's interesting because it's something I've heard Bill Gates talk about too, that kind of the purpose of philanthropy is to take these kinds of risks, to go after really big, hard problems, because if you don't do it, who's going to do it? And that's something philanthropy has the opportunity and the responsibility to do. How do you see it on the global scale when you think of the humanitarian sector? One of the major focus areas of the foundation, and the fact that things are extremely challenging, and as I said, maybe going to get much worse over the next decade. How does the foundation tackle a challenge like that?
Well, I think the key is to think in terms of multi-stakeholder partnerships, not just by oneself and not only with one species, not only different foundations getting together, but bring together different actors who have different strengths, different superpowers, bring them together and tackle it together. That's in a domestic case, that's the federal and local government, which typically have greater resources. But philanthropy, what it brings is it can take a long-term perspective. It doesn't have an electoral cycle. It doesn't have a business cycle. It doesn't raise money. So we can commit to something and keep the lights on, serve as the backbone, and keep prodding for people to work on a topic. In humanitarian, one of our main objectives is to see more resources getting to local organizations. The situation that exists is really, I think the most generous word one could put on it is skewed, where about 99% of funding that flows through the humanitarian system, the refugee system, goes first either to a UN organization or to an international NGO. And it may make it to a local organization, it may not. And it's our conviction that a lot more could be gotten directly to people who are on the front lines, who know the situation well, who stretch a dollar, and who have a long-term commitment, a lifetime commitment to the place that they're in. And I've had experience in previous organizations about getting money out to really community-based organizations and seeing what they could do with it. And if foundations can do that, the global system can do that as well.
Yeah, and relatively small amounts of money, if they get into the right hands at that local level, can have huge impacts. But because of political constraints, risk aversion, very often it doesn't happen. As you say, the statistics are kind of appalling on what percent actually makes it to these groups. And I've actually met at your annual symposia where you give out the prize and have these incredible people from around the world come to talk about the future of the humanitarian sector. I've actually met some of these smaller community-based organization leaders, and you hear from them directly, and they say what you're saying, which is it doesn't really matter how great the work is that they're doing. They just have such a hard time getting that message out and finding a sustainable way to fund that work.
Well, and we larger established organizations will always talk about taking their operations to scale. The thing to realize is that community-based organizations are already collectively operating at scale. There is one or more in just about every community, no matter how conflict affected it is, no matter how poor it is. And in Africa and other regions, one of the most renewable and abundant resources is solidarity, really pulling together with one another and solving problems together. And sometimes we get in our own way. I'm thinking here particularly of multilaterals and large bilaterals, about the heaviness of the systems we put in place to be absolutely sure that the last nickel was spent in the way that we wanted it to be. And we end up pricing almost every organization out of the market and spending most or a large chunk of money on monitoring, evaluation, accountability, et cetera, and not nearly enough on actual impact, and not nearly enough in getting the last mile.
Yeah, you're making me think one of the trends in the philanthropy field today is this idea of big bets, where you have foundations, sometimes individually, sometimes as a group, saying, hey, we're going to put up a huge sum of money. I think of MacArthur's $100 million and change, they call it. And you get these exciting ideas that bubble up to the top, and somebody wins this enormous sum. Maybe we need to think about small bets too, not just big bets, and getting the relatively small amounts of money, but into the hands of organizations, as you say, that are already at scale, can have a huge impact.
Indeed, and I think the humanitarian community has made real strides in their ability to get cash to individuals. Right? That's a sea change in the way refugees are supported. We haven't yet made as much progress in getting cash to individual organizations, and yet we have all the tools we need for that. Look at M-Pesa in Kenya. If we had a system like that globally, who needs the annual grant of $1 million that gets then sent to 10 different organizations when you could do weekly grants, or you could do $500 grants, or some of my colleagues may be uncomfortable about thinking about how you manage all of that. But I think the possibility is there, the organizations are there, and manifest good is there.
Yeah, given the scale of the challenges we're talking about, we are going to need to change the way that we work if we want to get there, right? I mean, there's simply no way to just keep doing what we're doing. Business as usual is probably not going to get us to the goals that you and foundations like yours have set.
I think that's manifest, right? I mean, it was already true about the SDGs. We knew from the time the gavel went down that we didn't have a good implementation and financing plan. And most meetings about the SDGs include a piece about, well, where will we get the money to do this, right? That should have been thought through before the plan was approved, right? And it should be thought through in the next version, right? But I think and that requires financing larger than what we have so far. Now we've got COVID, which has raised questions, COVID and the racial equity crisis in the States, which have raised questions about public health systems, about the just equity in society, and changes that require a lot of both of financing, but of openness to doing things in a different way. And we are talking now, a whole range of people are talking about building back better, not going back to the inequities that we had before, but going to an improved situation. I think we're at the point where people are starting to think through, how do we move beyond a slogan to actually doing that? And it's a tremendously exciting moment, but only if we come up with the ways to actually make it happen.
What do you think is the future of philanthropy writ large? I mean, we've got today or recently, there was an announcement that Mackenzie Bezos, now Mackenzie Scott, donated, I think, $1.7 billion to 116 organizations. She's entering into this game. There's so many other billionaire families and philanthropies getting there. The Hilton family's been there for a long, long time and has had a long commitment to this. Do you think that the foundation world is going to really start to shift? There's been a lot of criticism as well of all the rising wealth of the billionaire class and not that many families doing what the Hilton Foundation has done in terms of being generous with their giving. How do you see the broad picture of philanthropy evolving?
I think it will continue to grow. You are absolutely right. The Hilton family, in particular Conrad and Baron Hilton, who gave their entire fortunes to the foundation, are exemplary. They were giving pledge before the giving pledge, if you like. And I think that is an impulse that we will continue to see. I'm hoping it will rise as a percentage. And I think you get to a certain amount of accumulation of capital where your next possession doesn't make any difference, right? So I think that wherever capital is accumulating, you will see more philanthropy. I think that's true in China as well, even though the regulatory system is different. Certainly that is a place where there is a significant amount of excess capital. I think it's something we have to put to ourselves, though, today, is that the key issue in American society right now, I think it's pretty manifest that is inequity. and that is overaccumulation of capital at the very highest levels of society. So philanthropy is one good aspect of that, one aspect that we can be proud of if it works hard and well. But I think we will also be seeing social efforts, political efforts to distribute national wealth more fairly. And I think that we'll see what effect that has on philanthropy.
Yeah, and I think it could be one of the positive aspects of a prize like the Hilton Prize, that next billionaire philanthropist, so many of them are hiring consultants and really, spending years trying to figure out what to do. Well, here's a list of 25 organizations that have been vetted, that have done incredible work. Many of you may not have heard of, but are doing amazing. You could just go write a check to them. Obviously, there's many other organizations out there that are vetting and rating, but we need to get more and more sense of kind of accountability about, return on investment results, and something like a prize process that tries to find the very best, the exemplars, maybe helps us to do that.
Couldn't have said it better, Raj. I think that's absolutely right. The organizations that win the prize are very solid and very highly vetted, and they've tackled problems in a significantly different and promising way.
Well, Peter Lawhorn, thank you so much. Congratulations on 25 years of this prize. That is no small achievement. That is a major milestone for the foundation. Congratulations to Homeboy Industries for winning it in the 25th year. And we look forward to really learning more about what the foundation is doing, something we at DevEx will keep covering and talking to you about in time as the Hilton Foundation continues to grow in its presence and its endowment, in its role in the humanitarian and development communities globally.
Thanks, Raj. Always a pleasure and an inspiration to talk to you.